Blasters on full.
What's up guys, Gripe here with a review of the S.H.Figuarts Luke Skywalker figure. And we'll start out with the packaging, and it's fairly typical Figuarts Star Wars line packaging. You've got the big window up front, showing off all the accessories here, as well as the figure. And on the side we have a picture of the figure, along with a little blurb underneath about Figuarts line. And on the back of the box we've got a few close-up shots of the different heads included, as well as a nice battle pose there with Vader. And on this side we have the same silver graphic that's on all of the Star Wars line boxes. And on the top we have the Star Wars logo and the figure name. And we've got some Japanese writing on the bottom here that I cannot read. And again, this is pretty typical packaging for the Star Wars line from Figuarts. So now check out the accessories, and we will start with the lightsaber. And the lightsaber's got a very nicely detailed sculpt, as well as a very clean and precise paint app with all the black and gold accents over the silver. And you can see this hole here, that's for plugging onto Luke's belt, which I'll show you a little bit more in a minute. And unlike Vader, where it had two separate lightsabers on and off, this one has one handle and two tops, as you can see here. And those just pull out and plug in into the top there, and they fit fairly firmly. And unfortunately you can see my beam is bent. And as you can see here, there's some paint splattered on the beam, which is pretty annoying. And it's really not something you would expect to see from Figuarts. It's fairly sloppy. But overall, aside from those issues, I'd say the lightsaber is definitely pretty nice. And I'll show you how it attaches to his belt, and you can see that black peg there. It goes in the square hole, and you just give it a push, and there you go. And I think that's a very nice feature that they added. Now check out the hands, and this figure does come with 3 sets of hands in total. And here we have the left lightsaber holding hand, and you can see it's got a nice flesh tone to it, as well as some nice subtle shading around the hand there, and some nice details in the sculpt. And now we'll check out the right lightsaber holding hand. This one is gloved, and you can see some nice details in the sculpt with this as well, with the wrinkles all on the back of the hand here and around the fingers. And here's the left relaxed hand, and this one's got some really nice details in it. You can see a lot of creases all over the hand and some veins sculpted into it, as well as some really nice shading on it, although I think they went a touch too red on the knuckles there. But overall, it's a really nice hand. And here's the right relaxed hand. And again, this one is gloved, and you can see all the great details in the sculpt on this one as well, with the creases in the glove. Now we have the left fist, and this is what comes installed on the figure. And again, you can see some really nicely detailed sculpt here with creases all over the hand and some subtle shading in the flesh tones. And the gloved one, and again, same thing, you have those nice creases sculpted right into it. And now I'll take a closer look at the heads, which are just great on this figure. You can see it's a really nicely detailed sculpt, very accurate to Mark Hamill. It's also got an amazing paint job on it. The hair is a little too metallic for my taste, but overall it's fairly nicely sculpted. And you can see the great shading on the face there under the eyes and the lips. And now I'll check out one of the cooler features with this figure, and that's the ability to switch faces, which is pretty nice. And with that feature, you can mix and match the faces and hairstyles, which is definitely a nice addition. You just have to pull the head apart. It does come apart in half like this. And I'm just being a little gentle. I don't want to break anything or chip any paint. And the back of the head here does go with the hair on the face. It's actually the face that you would switch out. But the hair comes off like this. Just pops right up. And then you would use the other face, pop the hair on it, put it back together. And again, you do have those cuts in the middle, but it's really not that big of an issue, I think, when you get such a cool feature. And there you have it. So now check out the other heads. And the second Luke head you get with this figure is the one with the windswept hair and the open mouth. And this is another great head sculpt. Very accurate and very nicely detailed. The paint on it is just superb. You've got great paint all around the eyes and the lips. The hair is a bit on the metallic side, which I'm not that big a fan of. And the forehead does strike me as a little bit large, but it does kind of match up with the movies. And now we'll check out the third and final head, the unmasked Vader or old Anakin. And this is another really great head sculpt. You can see all the detail there on the bottom of the mask, on the face, all the wrinkles and scars. That huge head wound on the top just looks great. Really great painting and shading all around on this. It does seem like it's a bit large for his body, especially when compared to the masked one, but overall it's a really great accessory to throw in with this figure. So now we'll check out the Luke figure itself, and we will start with the paint and sculpt on it. And overall, the paint job is not that complex. It's mostly a matte black, which looks really nice. The boots are a nice shiny black, as you can see. I also think they did a really good job with the flesh tones on this figure. Some of the better flesh tones I've seen, and there's some subtle shading in the flesh on the neck. And the belt here is soft plastic and is separate from the rest of the body. And you can see there's some nice silver accents painted and sculpted onto it. It's got the pouch on the right here. And it does have the peg on the left side over by the silver accents here. And overall the sculpt is really nicely detailed. There's a lot of nice little wrinkles and creases in the uniform. And you can also see they sculpted in some details here in the shoulder sockets, which is nice. You really only see them if you push the shoulders out, but they do match with the rest of the folds or seams on the top of the chest. And you can really see all these nice creases and wrinkles here on the back. He's even got some on the butt there. And you have this nice collar here, and that is sculpted onto the neck. It is not part of the chest or shoulders, so it does move when you move the neck. So now we'll check out the articulation on the figure. So we'll start with the head articulation, and the head and neck on this figure are articulated separately. They're both on ball joints. And he looks down about that far, and he looks up about that far. And you do have some side-to-side movement, although it's primarily in the neck. There's really not too much movement that you can get out of the head side to side, as the hair does block the range of motion. And you can rotate the head, although most of the rotation is actually in the neck. The head you can only get so far due to the chin hitting the throat on the figure. And while you can't rotate the head fully around, you do get a pretty lifelike range of motion. It's got typical Figuarts shoulder joints, and you can get the arms up about that high. And you can move the shoulders around in the sockets, not nearly as much though as the Vader or Stormtrooper figure. And you can rotate the arm completely around, although it is pretty stiff, and it feels like you have to kind of twist the arm to get it all the way around in a few spots like there. I would say it's actually fairly similar to an actual real-life shoulder joint. And there is no bicep swivel or upper arm swivel. It's really just that twist that you get of the arm. Again, it's fairly lifelike. You can't get it all the way around, but you can get some decent movement out of it. And this figure has a single jointed elbow. It does have some pretty good flex. You can get it over 90 degrees, but you can't get it all the way in. And it does extend completely straight. It's got your typical swivel and hinge wrist joint. You could swivel it all the way around, and depending where you're positioning the hand, you can hinge it in any direction. And the figure does have a diaphragm joint, and let me just isolate it so you can see the movement there. And you can get it back about that far and forward about that far. And it does also have movement at the waist. You can see you can get the waist about that far back and forward. And it does go pretty far side to side on the diaphragm joint. And you can also get a little bit of side to side movement from the waist, but not nearly as much as the diaphragm. And you can get some rotation out of the diaphragm, although you're not getting much. The majority of the rotation is going to come from the waist, although you can't really get it too far. You're limited to fairly lifelike movement. The legs go out about that far, and kick up about that far, but they only kick back about that far. That's all you can get. It does have single jointed knees on this figure, and you can bend them about that far, which is actually pretty good for a single joint. And the back of the joint does pop out a little bit, as you can see, but it's really not that bad. And unfortunately, this is the only rotation that you can get on the entire leg, is at the hip joint here. There's no upper thigh swivel, there's no swivel at the knee, and nothing at the calf, which is really disappointing and one of my major gripes with the articulation with this figure. The ankles do go down about that far, and up about that far. You do have full rotation, and you have a pretty nice pivot on it. And the toes, which are actually quite well articulated, you can get those up that far, which is really far, and down pretty far. And I wish the Vader and Stormtrooper had similar articulation on the toes. So now I'll check out the size and scale of this figure. And as you can see, he stands at about 5 6/8 inches tall, and I think he may be a little too tall for the rest of the line, as you can see here. I think the Vader should be taller, and the Luke should maybe be a little bit shorter, and I think that would make the whole line scale a little bit better. And here he is next to the abysmal Black Series Cloud City Skywalker, who in my opinion looks more like a sad Robert Redford than a Mark Hamill. And you can see this figure just blows that one away. And here he is next to the sad Robert Redford Black Series figure and the Black Series Stormtrooper. So all in all, I think this is a killer Luke Skywalker figure, and I really think Bandai hit it out of the park with those head sculpts. Paint apps on it are really great. There is some weirdness with the articulation, especially with the arms, and the lack of any type of rotation on the legs, but I still think this is the best Luke Skywalker you're going to get short of a Hot Toys. Alright guys, I hope you liked the review. Subscribe for more.
Set blasters on full.